Hello and welcome back to Hudson Auto Films. Today we continue the journey of combining this Aston Martin V8 Vantage and this Land Rover Discovery. If you didn't see the last episode, the Discovery underwent the initial teardown, removing the majority of the body and turning it into, well, this. And in today's episode we're continuing the strip down, but we have to be a lot more careful. Everything we cut off in the last episode, without a doubt, had to be removed. However, we're now at a point where we need to figure out what we need to retain in order for the Aston body to correctly mount to the chassis of the Discovery. This is where we need to figure out the nitty-gritty of where bulkheads sit, how steering is going to connect, where pedals are going to sit, all of this sort of thing. And this is something we have to be very sure of, as it's very easy to cut parts of these cars away. It's a lot harder to put it back. So, let's get cracking. So I have a feeling with a handful of small incisions, this whole back portion will come off. The rust has done most of the work for us. It hasn't yet ceased to amaze me just how rusty this car is. The way that back portion came off was shocking. But before we can remove any more metal and body parts, we need to remove this interior. So I'm going to whip the seats out, then we can start cracking on with the dash. Well, that wasn't too bad, but now it's time to remove the dash. I've been able to find some pretty detailed instructions online, so I'm going to put you on time lapse and let's see if we can get this whole thing out. Okay, so after a lot of unbolting and unscrewing, I think the dash is now free. So I'm just going to try and pull it off. I'm sure loads of things will be connected behind it, so it's not going to be particularly satisfying. It won't just be whipping it out. But yeah, let's see if we can get this thing off. Well, that was quite an ordeal. So now the dashboard is completely out, I need to have a good clean up and make sure I label everything. I've been labeling all the wires as I've gone along, but I just want to make sure everything is as sorted as possible so we don't have any problems further down the line. So I'm going to clean this thing up and we'll see where we are. But then, after a long, productive day, disaster struck. The car would not start. Initially, I thought maybe this was a circuit issue, and that perhaps the removal of dials and switches had led to power not getting where it needs to go. But after reconnecting everything and still no luck, I started looking online. Finding no obvious faults, I thought I'd take a look at the rather bodged hot wire system that the car needs to start. After tracing wires going nowhere, I eventually found the culprit. It was just a broken fuse on this peculiar hot wired system. So here goes nothing. Okay, so that's more or less all the unbolting of the dashboard done. The whole air conditioning unit is out, blower motors, all of that sort of thing. There are a few tiny things in the corners which I need to remove, but right now those are fine. I'm a little bit bored of unbolting, so I want to do some more removal of the floor. This whole front floor section is more or less loose. Unfortunately, because the body is so rusty, the body mounts are kind of just holding thin air right now. So this should be pretty easy to remove. It is quite a big section though, so I might need to do a bit of a patchwork sort of cut. But initially I'm going to cut all the way along here. I'm going to cut around the handbrake because I want to leave it connected. I know that sounds a bit strange, but I want to keep everything as functional as possible right now. Then once I've done that, I'll try and remove the floor, but if it's too tricky, I'll then make some more cuts and we'll remove it in sections. So let's get cutting. seems like a good stage to have a little catch up. So that is more or less all of the floor, the wings, the wheel arches, all gone. And as I keep saying, the rust never ceases to amaze me, especially on the wheel arch sections. I had to do a little bit of cutting, but they were literally just falling away. You might be asking yourself at this stage, why am I doing it this way? Why am I chopping all these bits out and not just unbolting bits and trying to remove it in a more systematic way? Well, it's two reasons. First of all, the extent of the rust means you can't really unbolt a lot of these things in the car. The idea of lifting body panels off or lifting things off the proper way, the whole thing would just twist and fold to pieces. So that would be very tricky for me on my own to handle. Second of all, I need to keep the car fully functional, which is why things like the coolant overflow is just hanging there and wires are kind of going all over the place, being held up by pieces of wood. Again, I'm on my own, so I need to be able to move the car. I also need to take it a few miles away to do the welding on the chassis. So the car has to stay fully functional and mobile for just a little bit longer. So that is why I'm taking this patchwork approach. So now all that's left is the bulkhead, and it's only held on by two mounts and kind of the components that are keeping it in place. So yeah, you wouldn't want to trust that. But for the car to remain mobile, I only really need to retain this section, which houses the steering wheel, pedals, brakes, all of that sort of thing. Which means about 2/3 of the bulkhead I can remove, from about here to here. At which point, obviously, this will be even more precarious. It's incredibly precarious now. Taking away 2/3 of it will make it barely holding on. But as I said, I need to keep the car mobile. And I've definitely saved the biggest job till last. The goal is to make a big incision here. A lot of the bulkhead is very thin, however there is a crash structure which kind of is up here, which is very thick. So I'll need to take that out in sections so I can get access to the back of it. But before I make that cut, I need to remove anything that is clinging onto the bulkhead, pull wires through, and then hopefully we can make the cut. So there we have it, a more or less fully stripped Land Rover Discovery, the epitome of a lightweight. It was actually a remarkably time-consuming job taking all the body off, especially because we're trying to retain its drivability. Cutting through all of these things which were never meant to be cut through and are meant to be very strong is actually quite challenging, but we got there in the end. As you can probably see, this last bit of bulkhead is not particularly strong. It is just about holding the wheels and pedals in place, but you wouldn't want to take this on a long drive. Not to mention my seat currently is a small piece of wood and the battery is being held in by a couple of pieces of wood as well and another piece of wood here. So, you know, Land Rover build quality. But it is quite a remarkable thing seeing it like this. And maybe it's just me, but as a car lover, seeing everything in its rawest form is just cool. The fact it still works in this form is even cooler to me. But now you can see the platform that our wrecked Aston is going onto. Having removed all the body, we can properly see the chassis, and even though it's covered in a lot of surface rust, the majority of it is pretty good. However, there is certainly a bit more welding than I initially anticipated, but it's a Land Rover, and luckily it's very easy to weld this sort of thing. So, what is next? Well, in the next episode, we're going to do just that. Give everything a damn good clean, scrape off all the rust, and weld in any repairs we need to do. It'll also be a good opportunity to do all sorts of things like suspension, bushings. The car doesn't seem to really have any bushings left, and there's a few suspension parts which are just outright missing. There's not a shock on that side. So yeah, that will be the time to do it. Then we'll paint the chassis and get everything as tip-top as possible, ready for the Aston body to go onto it. Well, I think that just about wraps up this episode, but before I go, I think I might take it for one last test drive, but definitely a little bit slower this time. Well, I definitely wouldn't recommend that. Please remember, everything done on this channel is undertaken by incredibly well-trained knobs, so don't try that at home. But thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed, and even if you didn't, please like, share, subscribe. It really helps me out, allows me to keep making these crazy things, which is maybe not a good thing. If you'd like to support the channel, my Patreon is linked down below, where I post more or less every day, behind the scenes, content, all that sort of thing, and that's where you get to see everything a few weeks before it comes out. But regardless, I'm just happy you're here. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.